Ask yourself one question. The BJP is today the most powerful political party in India. It wins elections after elections. The Ram temple has been built. The constitution is being debated. Institutions are being questioned. But nobody actually tells you where did this come from. Like, where did this idea originate? Who was thinking this and why? That is what this video is all about. The actual intellectual history of BJP's ideology, from Savarkar all the way to Modi. The full lineage, the full context. And I promise you, by the end of this, whatever you currently think about the BJP, left or right, your thinking will be sharper. So let's get into it. Before we get into names and dates, I need you to understand the context in which this ideology was born. Because no idea comes from nowhere. It's the early 20th century. India is under British colonial rule. The independence movement is building momentum. Gandhi is turning it into a mass movement. Non-violence, satyagraha, Hindu-Muslim unity. And there is a group of thinkers, mostly Maharashtrian Brahmins, mostly upper caste, who are watching all of this and feeling a very specific anxiety. Their anxiety goes like this. Okay, let's say we get independence. Let's say the British leave. Then what? Who exactly is this Indian people that will now govern themselves? What holds them together? Is not being British enough of an identity to build a nation on? These are not crazy questions. European thinkers had been wrestling with the same questions for 2 centuries. What makes a nation? Language, territory, religion, culture, shared history? And the answer that emerged from this particular group of thinkers, the answer that eventually became BJP's foundational ideology was this. India is not just a country, India is a civilization, and that civilization is Hindu. That one sentence, unpacked properly, explains almost everything about how the BJP thinks, how it campaigns, and what it is actually trying to do. So let's unpack it, starting from the very beginning. The story doesn't start with Savarkar. It starts a little earlier with Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Tilak was a Maharashtrian Brahmin. Fierce, brilliant, uncompromising. The British called him the father of Indian unrest. He was one of the most influential political voices of the late 1800s and early 1900s. He did 2 things that matter for our story. First, he took the Ganesh Chaturthi festival and turned it into a mass public event. What had been a relatively private religious celebration, he made communal. Thousands of people gathering in public squares, celebrating together. His logic was explicit. If you want political consciousness, you first need cultural consciousness. Get Hindus to feel like a community, then they will act like one. Second, he revived the memory of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the 17th century Maratha king who fought the Mughal Empire. He turned Shivaji into a nationalist hero, someone Hindus could point to and say, we have our own history, our own heroes, our own civilizational pride. Tilak was not building a party, he was building a cultural imagination. The idea that Hindus need to become politically self-aware as Hindus before they can be politically powerful. That project, cultural consciousness before political power, is the direct ancestor of everything that follows. Now we come to the central figure, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. Savarkar is one of the most complicated figures in Indian intellectual history. Let me give you 3 facts about him that together tell you exactly why. 1. He was a revolutionary, jailed by the British, transported to the cellular jail in the Andaman Islands, one of the most brutal prisons in the British Empire. He spent years there in a solitary confinement. 2. He was an atheist. He did not believe in God. He did not follow Hindu religious ritual. He ate beef at various points in his life. 3. He became the father of Hindu nationalism. Let that sink in. The man who gave Hindu nationalism its name and its entire philosophical architecture was himself not a practicing Hindu in any conventional sense. In 1923, while still imprisoned, Savarkar wrote a pamphlet, Hindutva, Who is a Hindu? And in that pamphlet, he asked what sounds like a simple question, who is a Hindu? His answer completely reframes the word. He said, a Hindu is not defined by religious belief or practice. A Hindu is someone for whom India is both Pitrabhumi, that is fatherland, and Punyabhumi, that is holy land. Let me explain that distinction, because it is the hinge the entire ideology swings on. For a Hindu, whether they are a devout temple goer or an atheist like Savarkar himself, India is the land where their ancestors come from and the land where their civilization originated. Their cultural roots and their civilizational roots are both here in this soil. But for a Muslim, Savarkar argued, the Holy Land is Mecca. For a Christian, it is Jerusalem. The spiritual center of gravity points outside India, and therefore, at a civilizational level, there is a divided loyalty. Now, I want to be very clear about what I am doing here. I am explaining Savarkar's argument, not endorsing it. Critics, serious, credible critics, have pointed out that this framework is deeply problematic, that Indian Muslims and Christians have been part of this land for centuries, that cultural identity is far more complex than where a religion originated, that this logic, followed to its conclusion, produces discrimination regardless of intent. These objections are real, they matter, but you cannot understand the BJP's ideology, its instincts, its anxieties, its vision of India without understanding that this is the foundation. The nation as a civilizational unit, culture as the basis of political belonging. Savarkar gave the ideology its name and its philosophical architecture, but it was M.S. Golwalkar, known as the Guruji, who turned it from a pamphlet into a machine. Golwalkar led the RSS from 1940 to 1973, 33 years, during which he shaped the organization into something that had never existed before in Indian public life. The RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, had been founded in 1925 in Nagpur by K.B. Hedgewar. But under Golwalkar, it became something disciplined, coherent, and deeply ambitious. Golwalkar's key text, We or Our Nationhood Defined, written in 1939, is the most explicit statement of the ideology's harder edges. He argued that non-Hindu communities in India had two choices: assimilate fully into the Hindu cultural mainstream or live as subordinate communities without claim to equal citizenship. He also, and this passage has followed the RSS ever since, pointed to Nazi Germany's treatment of Jews as an example of how a nation protects its cultural identity. He described it approvingly. The RSS has spent decades trying to contextualize or walk back from this passage, but it is there in the text. I am telling you this not to indict the RSS, but because intellectual honesty demands it. You cannot tell this history selectively and expect to understand anything. What Golwalkar built institutionally was the Shakha system, daily morning gatherings across thousands of locations across India, young men doing physical drills, discussing ideology, forming brotherhood, every single day, not just before elections, every day. The genius of the Shakha, and I'm using that word in a purely organizational sense, is that it creates identity before politics. By the time a young RSS volunteer enters political life, he already has a fully formed sense of who he is, what India means to him, and what he is fighting for. The BJP, when it came, was built on top of this. It inherited a cadre that was already ideologically formed. That is an extraordinary structural advantage, one that no other Indian political party has ever replicated. The political arm came in 1951. Shama Prasad Mukherjee, a Bengali leader, former member of Nehru's cabinet, founded the Bharatiya Jansangh, the BJP's direct ancestor. And the Jansangh's early years are instructive because they show you how far ideology can be from electoral power. In Nehruvian India, secular, socialist, non-aligned, the Jansangh was a fringe party. It won a handful of seats. Its candidates lost badly. The country had just come through partition, one of the most traumatic communal events in human history, and there was a powerful political consensus that India's future lay in civic nationalism, Hindu-Muslim unity, secularism. The Jansangh kept its ideology but could not find its voters. The thinker who tried to solve this problem was Deen Dayal Upadhyay, the Jansangh's most original mind. Upadhyay developed a concept called integral humanism, the idea that India needed an economic and social philosophy rooted in its own civilizational genius, not Western capitalism, not Soviet socialism, but something arising from India's own cultural essence, what he called the Chiti, the national soul. Integral humanism was an attempt to give the ideology a positive vision, not just who the enemy is, but what we are actually for. Upadhyay was killed in mysterious circumstances in 1968. His portrait still hangs in BJP offices across the country. The decisive rupture in the story came in 1975. Indira Gandhi declared the emergency, democratic rights suspended, opposition leaders jailed, press censored, the RSS was banned, its workers were imprisoned. And when the emergency ended, when Indira Gandhi was defeated in 1977, the Jansangh merged with other opposition parties to form the Janata Party. India's first non-Congress government at the centre. That experiment collapsed within 2 years. The RSS affiliated members refused to give up their dual membership in the Janata Party and the RSS simultaneously. Their coalition partners saw this as a fundamental incompatibility. You cannot be loyal to a party, separate ideological organization at the same time, they argued. The Jansangh members walked out, and in 1980 they founded the Bharatiya Janata Party. The founding BJP made an interesting strategic choice. Under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, it tried to go moderate, soft pedal Hindutva, position itself as a party of good governance and democratic values. It called its philosophy Gandhian socialism. In 1984, riding the sympathy wave after Indira Gandhi's assassination, Congress won 404 seats. The BJP won just two seats. That near-death experience forced a reckoning. Moderation has failed completely. The party needed to go back to its roots. The reckoning came in the form of L.K. Advani and the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. In 1990, Advani launched his Rath Yatra, a chariot procession from Somnath in Gujarat to Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh, demanding the construction of a Ram temple at the site of the Babri Masjid, a 16th century mosque that the BJP claimed had been built after demolishing a temple at the exact birthplace of Lord Ram. The Rath Yatra moved through hundreds of towns and villages. It generated enormous crowds. It triggered communal tension across India. Advani was arrested, and in December 1992, a mob demolished the Babri Masjid with their bare hands. Electorally, the strategy worked. The BJP went from 2 seats in 1984 to 85 in 1989 to 120 in 1991. What Advani demonstrated was what Savarkar had theorized 70 years earlier, but never actually proved, that Hindu identity could be made politically salient across caste lines, that enough Indians would vote as Hindus, not as Brahmins or Yadavs or Rajputs or Gujaratis, if the emotional charge was powerful enough. That discovery that Hindu consolidation across caste was achievable is probably the single most important political finding in post-independence Indian history. Everything that came after, Modi 2014, 2019, the Ram temple consecration, flows directly from that discovery. Which brings us to where the ideology stands today. What Modi added to the Hindutva framework, starting with his Gujarat years and culminating in his national dominance, was a developmental narrative. The earlier BJP under Advani was primarily about cultural identity and grievance. The Hindu has been wronged. The temple must be built. The appeasement of minorities must end. Modi kept that framework completely intact, but he overlaid it with something new. And we will also build roads, provide cooking gas, cylinders, send money directly to your bank accounts, build toilets, give you a house. The BJP stopped being only a party of cultural assertion. It also became a party of state capacity and welfare delivery. This combination, civilizational pride plus administrative competence, proved extraordinarily powerful. It allowed the BJP to hold its ideological base while reaching voters who cared primarily about development. It reframed Hindutva not as backward-looking identity politics, but as civilizational confidence. We are a great culture and we will also be a modern prosperous nation. The Ram temple consecration in January 2024 was the symbolic culmination of this entire 100 years journey. What Savarkar theorized in 1923, what Golwalkar institutionalized through the RSS, what Advani mobilized on the streets in 1990, what the Supreme Court finally ruled on in 2019, all of it came together in that ceremony in Ayodhya. An idea that began in the margins of the independence movement, dismissed, marginalized, electorally humiliated, had 100 years later become the organizing principle of the Indian state. So that is the lineage. Tilak gave it cultural consciousness, Savarkar gave it the philosophical framework, Golwalkar built the institution, the Jansangh gave it political form. Advani proved that the ideology could win elections, and Modi added a developmental narrative that turned it into a genuine mass movement. This is a 100-year project, and if you want to understand it seriously, not just react to it, you have to see that full arc. Whether this ideology is right or wrong, that is a completely different conversation, and we will have that conversations in a future video. But today's point was simpler than that. Understand first, judge later. If you found this useful, like the video, share it with someone who you think needs to hear this, and subscribe, because this channel is going to keep doing exactly this kind of serious, grounded political content. See you in the next one.